From Rhythm and Light in Chicago, I'm Steve Ordower, and welcome to Rhythm of Life. Today on the show, I sit down with an actor who has been a fixture on the film and television landscape for decades. You may know him from The Ghostbusters, Miss Congeniality, the HBO series Oz, The Crow, or a slew of other productions. But today, you will get to know him in a very personal way as we explore his long and winding career. So sit back and enjoy this thoughtful, fascinating, inspiring, and at times downright hilarious conversation I had with this American treasure, who is one of the most gracious and thoughtful people I know, and happens to be a very dear friend of mine, Mr. Ernie Hudson.
We haven't gotten here by accident. I mean, that school I went to, I was able to sort of come out of it, but most of those kids, almost all those kids, they got lost, and did not have great lives. But it's needed. Whether we'll step up to the reckoning without going to civil war. I mean, whether we'll see there's a need, and maybe we personally might not have, a reason to say, we need to be inclusive. We're all in this together. That sense of unity as Americans. Of course, now with the whole social media and the internet and all that stuff, I mean, they're playing with our minds and trying to control and all that.
Oh my gosh!
I don't know how we overcome this new place we're at, but I think we have to. And the thing with African American movies and some of the stuff they're doing, these stories have not been told. They need to be told.
Yes.
But the whole angst and some of the tragic stuff, we didn't survive with just the tragedy. People loved and laughed. I just trusted the universe, the Holy Spirit would guide me there. I didn't know how. I didn't know anybody. Never knew an actor. Never met an actor, but I just knew that it's in the asking. And of course, you have to prepare yourself and all that. But so there was never a doubt in my mind, a question that I would be successful. The problem was, I think I prayed not the wrong prayer. I should have added to that prayer, I want to make a lot of money. When you ask, I just want to work. I want to work. If you can just let me work in this industry, I'll honor it, and I'll be so thankful. I should have said, and make a lot of money. I forgot to put the money in.
I'm sorry, I forgot how funny you were.
I was doing a play in LA. I met Michael, didn't know him. Actually, he was at a party, and I just sort of went up and introduced myself and asked if he would introduce me to his agent, which he looked at me like, what? I don't even know you. But I guess because I had the audacity to ask, and I asked very sincerely, because why wouldn't he? And he said, okay.
Of course.
So he called his agent, and the agent gave me an appointment to go see him in Beverly Hills. I went into Beverly Hills, and I was intimidated to be in Beverly Hills. Parked, and then I went in to see this guy and waited. And finally he came out to call me in the office. And before I could say anything, he said, listen, the only reason I'm seeing you is because Michael is one of my best clients, and he asked me to see you. So I saw you. So now you can leave. And I said, but I'm new, and I was trying to give him my little spiel. And he said, I don't want to hear that. I said, I don't want to hear it. I tried to show my portfolio. He says, I don't want to see that shit. He says, I get this shit in the mail every day. And he held up his waste basket, and it had a bunch of photos that actors had sent in. And he says, so I said, well, because I asked, can I give you my picture in case something comes up? He said, what am I going to do with that? So he says, best thing you can do is go back to Detroit or wherever the hell you come from, because you're not going to work out here. I can tell you that now. There's nothing for you here.
Today, guest host Bob Hercules sits down with the prolific author, journalist, and filmmaker, Alex Kotlowitz.
When I had finished the bulk of the reporting, I went through this kind of really deep depression, unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And I wasn't kind of self-aware enough to realize what was going on, but I realized in hindsight, I went into therapy, I needed to, it had so much to do with all these stories that I had digested over the course of the previous few years. I mean, for me, the great catharsis I had, of course, is I was able to take pen to paper and tell these stories.
Right.
And there's something really empowering about
like your father had done many years earlier,
about his
to
own
get it out on
right.
paper is cathartic.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a brave book to have taken on. And I, again, don't mean to take anything away from the trauma that they experienced, but for you as well, it's difficult. But I'm so glad you wrote this book, because, again, it gives us an insight. All we hear about is, this person was killed in a shootout or this and that, and we don't know who these people are.
Right, and more often than not, you read stories that it was gang related, suggesting that the victim would kind of got their due, or what goes around comes around, or we just have these stories or headlines of numbers like we're in a pennant race, and we kind of forget about these individuals.
I want privacy 18. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm a gangbanger. I ain't gonna lie. I'm gonna keep it real with you.
Silas Ratcliffe and Maurice Childress are both 16. Both are associated with a gang and say they wouldn't be surprised if they were shot today.
Just walking down the street, you never know. Walking down the street, you never know. It just be your time to go.
Right, you always gotta look behind, turn your back.
Bullets ain't got no name.
They might want to kill me, and then they end up killing you, and not killing me.
The kids are matter of fact about the things they do and what they've seen.
I've seen people get shot, killed, robbed, stabbed. I've done some of that, all that. It's just crazy.
According to Chicago police, the murder rate here is up 35% compared to last year. People living here say the gangs have taken over. Some say they'd like to see the National Guard come in.
We need help. You need help. That's the only way I can put it.
Maurice and Silas say there are no jobs and people have no idea how hard it is to survive.
Also, to recognize that it doesn't go away. It's not, you lose a loved one. It's not like a week from now you're walking around and beginning to experience all this joy again.
Right.
And you've got to, the other thing about it is, unlike veterans returning from combat, you got to look over your shoulder and worry about what's going to happen next.
That's right.
Hailed by NPR as one of America's defining voices of freedom and peace, Mavis Staples is an iconic artist whose impact on culture continues to reverberate. She's both a blues and a rock and roll Hall of Famer, a civil rights icon, a Grammy Award winner, and a chart-topping soul, gospel, R&B pioneer. She marched with Dr. King, performed at John F. Kennedy's inauguration, and sang in Barack Obama's White House. She's collaborated with a wide array of notable artists such as Prince, Bob Dylan, and Ry Cooder.
Well, Uncloudy Day took off. It took off, and she said, Staples, this record is selling like an R&B. And we began getting letters from all over, everywhere. I was singing bass on this song. We'd sing down in harmony. Whoa, they tell me. So we knew that the people had bet their money that I was not a little girl. We were fooling. My brother was singing. And we'd sing the song down till it came to my part. And Purvis would ease in to the microphone like he was going to say the bass part. And the people would go, wow, I told you that wasn't no little girl. I told you. And they going through all that. I'd ease in, and then I would come, well, oh. So yes, they tell me. Lord, they tell me now. I got a home, got a home beyond the sky. Man, the people, the disc jockeys would say, this is little 14-year-old Mavis Staples singing on Cloudy Day. People would not believe I was a little girl.
I bet they didn't.
I had to be either a man or a big fat lady. So we would fool the people. Man, the place would go, wow.
I bet it did.
They would go, because I was a little skinny girl.
A critic once said, "Give Jon Langford 4 hours with nothing to do, and chances are good he'll create another side project."
And we got quite good with minimal resources at actually putting on some kind of exciting show. But literally, it was all backwards. Rather than having a solo, someone would drop out.
Right.
So that's what the Gang of Four perfected that as well. Right. It was that was like a dub reggae thing, rather than add something else on top at this point. Right, the bass player drops out. Those were the kind of dynamics. They were very simple, but they were very effective. Punk was about, you had to be, I think the first gig with the Rosillos I was talking about, the John Keenan actually, we told him we only played slow songs. We were going to be the first punk band that only played slow songs, and he just went, "Well, you better speed them up or they'll tear you apart."
Before he left our studio, Jon performed a brand new song that he had just written, a fitting song for the divisive times we're in.
The mission is to frighten and confuse you, distract and call you losers. You're all losers, 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 losers. Now we're all losers.
Today in the studio, we welcome the prolific filmmaker, Bob Hercules. Primarily focusing on documentaries, his latest project, Maya Angelou and Still I Rise, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and went on to win 19 awards on 3 continents. The film aired on PBS's American Masters and most recently was awarded a Peabody for excellence in broadcasting. We discussed this film with Bob along with the rest of his illustrious career.
We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. That in fact it may be necessary to encounter defeats so we can know who the hell we are.
There was one clip that, the whole film struck me. It was a wonderful piece, and congratulations on it. But there was one piece in particular where she was speaking in front of a crowd of people, audience maybe 70, 100 people, what have you. She was talking about this, I think a woman who worked a service job as a maid or something like this, right. A single mother, and she laughed, but she wasn't really laughing.
Right.
I have written a poem for a woman who rides a bus in New York City. She's a maid. She has 2 shopping bags. When the bus stops abruptly, she laughs. If the bus stops slowly, she laughs. I thought, Now, if you don't know black features, you may think she's laughing. But she wasn't laughing. She was simply extending her lips and making a sound. I said, I see. That's that survival apparatus. Now, let me write about that to honor this woman who helps us to survive. 70 years in these folks' world. The child I works for calls me girl. I say, yes, ma'am, for working's sake. I'm too proud to bend and too poor to break. So I laugh until my stomach ache when I think about myself.
As I'm watching this film, I kept thinking, what did you take away from this experience? How has this enriched you personally?
Well, I learned some things from her. Forgiveness is one of her main things that she was always advocating, forgiveness and reconciliation. So I've always been a believer in that. But listening to her idea of it and her commitment to it really was very strong and solid. So it was something I learned a lot from her. The other thing I got from her was, we call the film And Still I Rise, which is from one of her famous poems. And I think about how inspiring her story is, that she came from this low level, from being a black woman in the Jim Crow South and being a woman in a white man's world and having been raped when she was 8 and all the crap you go through, and yet to rise above that. She was not bitter at all. She took that and made what she could of it, and she used, I think she, I guess I would say, had grace. That was her strongest.
Personified.
Yeah. She had tremendous grace in the face of such adversity. It was remarkable. And it was inspiring to me.
Today on the show, Bob Hercules sits down with attorney Flint Taylor to discuss the murder of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton in 1969, who is the subject of the recent film Judas and the Black Messiah.
All of these leaders and organizations were very powerful in the civil rights movement and in the black liberation struggle. So Hoover then sent out memos in 67 and again in early 68, calling for disruption and, quote, neutralization of these leaders and these organizations. And of course, we learned that neutralization is a term and was a term of art. CIA used it, and that could mean several things, but it included, of course, assassination. And that they named not only the organizations from SCLC all the way to the Nation of Islam and SNCC and Rap Brown and his organization, but they named those leaders as messiahs who could electrify and unify the black nationalist movement. They then Hoover sent out this memo saying we need to neutralize these leaders and these organizations and prevent the rise of a messiah who could do this in the sense of could electrify and unify the movement.
So we always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that.
And so Fred Hampton fit into that category soon after these memos went out. And of course, the second memo went out in early 1968, only a month before Dr. King was assassinated. And when they named the messiahs, they named King, they named Rap Brown, they named Stokely, they named Malcolm, even though he was already dead at that point, assassinated as well. And they didn't name Fred, but he fit that category. And of course, when the Panthers became stronger and their leadership became stronger, then those leaders, and particularly Fred, became a messiah who was targeted and ultimately assassinated by the FBI and local police here.
This is your friend, your client, somebody you had a lot of faith in, and it was a murderous rampage, really. I'm sorry to ask you, but what was this like for you personally to walk into that house?
Well, I was basically the same age as Fred Hampton, but of course from a very different background and a bit naive. So to walk in to the apartment, of course, the first thing was shock. There was blood on the floor outside of the apartment, the room that Fred Hampton had been asleep and murdered in, because his body had been dragged off of the bed and laid on the floor there. There were bullet holes. This was a very small apartment with plasterboard walls, dividing very, very tiny bedrooms,
right,
so that you could see bullet holes, which in fact were made by a machine gun that basically made the walls look like Swiss cheese in terms of the holes. It was extremely shocking. It was hard to, on the one hand, really comprehend the enormity of the crime that you were witnessing, but it was, in fact, a murder scene, a crime scene.
Yeah.
An assassination scene. And I think the fact that we shifted so quickly from shock to the kind of adrenaline-driven work of cataloging all of the bullets that were on the floor, bullet shells, and all the bullet holes. We didn't know what, exactly which pieces of evidence would be the ones that would be the most important. We did know that the front door was an important piece of evidence because they had started saying that there was one bullet hole, and it was the one that showed that the Panthers started it because it went from the inside to the outside.
Oh, right.
And so we, and Skip particularly, went to that door panel, saw there were two holes, one going in and one going out, and he then had the pictures and the video taken of the panel in the door, and then we took the panel out of the door and we transported it to a ballistics expert in upstate New York to be analyzed.
Wow.
And there were several things that were very cloak and daggerish and very much remained in my mind. The police had said Rush is next because Bobby Rush was not in the apartment. We thought they might be coming back to the apartment, so we were like operating under a certain amount of fear that actually we might be raided and arrested for what we were doing. We were taking the evidence every night to churches, and we wouldn't necessarily know where we were going until we were told. And then we'd go to the back door of the church, and a minister would let us in, and we'd go up a set of stairs to the attic, and that's where we would stash the evidence for safekeeping each night. And the Panthers, the bloody mattress that Fred was murdered on, they would take it and lock it up every night, and then every morning they bring it back and put it in its place, so when they did the tours they could point to it and say, this is the mattress that Fred was murdered on.
What inspired you to get into acting and writing to begin with?
I got married so young. I thought it would be very simple: get a job, take care of your family, buy a house, and how hard can it be? So, but it got complicated real fast.
I used to have those same thoughts.
Boy,
were we naive. Hey, man, much love. Thank you so much, Ernie.
Pleasure. Thank you. Best to the family. Take care.
Thank you for tuning into the show. If you're a fan of Ernie Hudson, make sure to check out his riveting performance in The Man in the Silo, available on Amazon Prime Video. Columnist Rick Kogan of the Chicago Tribune wrote, "It is a love story, ghost story, and psychological thriller, all playing out under the shadow of racial tension and backed by Bernard Herrmann's haunting score for Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo." And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, leave us a rating and review so more people can hear about us, and share about Rhythm of Life on social media, and like us on Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Steve Ordower.
This has been a Rhythm and Light production.